what two career tips would you give a high schooler, a college person, and a professional in that order?
Yeah. To a high schooler, start a business. To a college person, start a business. And to a professional, start a business. And the reason why I give that across the board is because once you're entering into a career space, I think it's really important to understand not only from the employee standpoint of the value you are trying to bring to a company, and a lot of the times extract, like what could this company give to me, and that's the kind of mind frame you go into it with, to what value can you create in this world, and how difficult it is to create those environments that you ideally want, And so a lot of the times that sort of tension exists between the employer and the employee because the perspectives tend to be from two different vantage points. And I think it's really important to sit in the business owner's perspective for a bit so you understand how difficult it is to create some of the things that you ideally want within as an employee.
Today, I'm interviewing Kyle Maloney, who is doing great work in developing the tech ecosystem in the Caribbean. So if you're living in the Caribbean or you want to give back to the region, he's definitely the person to contact. Kyle is a technology entrepreneur and marketer. He's a co-founder of TechBeach Retreat and Chef Made. Since 2011, Kyle has co-founded 5 technology-driven companies in industries of sustainability, healthy food, local business search, technology business convening, and digital marketing. Kyle's companies have been written about in global and regional publications like Forbes, The Huffington Post, Essence, and Inc. magazine. Kyle is also a next-gen board member of the Inter-American Development Bank in Trinidad. I hope you really enjoyed the interview, take away the lessons, and lots of stuff is happening in the Caribbean right now for tech, so please contribute. There we go.
The show where we talk about data science in the Caribbean, highlighting practical ways that you can learn, get involved, and create your own impact using artificial intelligence and machine learning. This is the Caribbean Data Science Podcast with Mark Moyu and Jeff Sayon.
Hi, Kyle. Thanks for coming on the show today. I'm very excited to do this interview. It's been a long time that I've been thinking about doing it, and hopefully you're excited as well.
As always, bro. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Perfect. And for those that are listening, I think out of all the podcasts that we've sort of recorded so far, I think this one is going to be very applicable for people who live at home in the Caribbean. Data science and machine learning, AI, whatever we want to call it, does not exist in a vacuum. Hence, you actually need a thriving business ecosystem, more so a tech ecosystem, in order to have more business problems to solve. So, Kyle's definitely going to tell us about what's happening in the region and what he and his team are up to. So I'd like to begin with where you currently work, what you do, and why you chose to do it.
Where I currently work, I'm the co-founder of TechBeach Retreat, and that's what I'm most known for. TechBeach is a platform that we've built over the last 5 years to connect the Caribbean technology ecosystem with the global tech ecosystems. People a lot of the times take for granted when you're in some of these hubs that my partner works at Facebook, or my partner works at Tesla, or whatever the case is, and we're talking about this problem set or this issue at work, and that sort of network effect helps people to solve problems a lot more organically, compared to when you're building something in your region. That isn't there. Your friends don't work at these technology companies, and so the impedance, the slowness of technology related innovation would occur because they don't have that ecosystem to help things move along a lot more quickly in that sort of organic way. And so I set out with my co-founder, Jamaican Kirk Anthony Hamilton, to really develop the overall technology ecosystem across the Caribbean. And what does that mean in practicality? What we've done is to harness the people through events that we have. So we brought them together through a series of conferences, summits, and small events across the last 5 years, with a mainstay event in Montego Bay, Jamaica. And we've attracted people from, I guess, almost a lot of the consumer-facing technology brands. So people from like Apple, Facebook, Uber, Airbnb, and that sort of thing. And then we've forged partnerships with a lot of these brands as well. Partnerships with Google, with Facebook, with Twitter. And these are new. They haven't had these types of partnerships for communities in the region, in the Caribbean, in that way before. And we've gone on to build an accelerator program that really focuses on the education piece and bringing together a lot of the pieces that the technology startups need in order to really accelerate their growth. And with this program, we just actually finished just about a week ago, our first cohort. I'm so proud. I sat back there looking at our demo day and the quality of companies coming through. We're really excited to see the promise that is coming through our region, that we would soon enough begin having our own unicorns.
Yes, fantastic.
Yeah.
So why do you think an accelerator program, more specifically, is sort of the way to push companies forward? What have you learned from all the other things that you researched, let's say in Silicon Valley and other tech hubs?
Yeah. Y Combinator recently put out their list of like top 100 and something companies, and that came through Y Combinator. And it's no coincidence that some of the best companies in the world, Airbnb, came through their programs, because what an accelerator program is bringing together a lot of the resources that entrepreneurs struggle to find for themselves, all into one compact program. So you get the education, you get mentorship, you get access to large corporates that you can partner with, have as your customers and that sort of thing. Then you get access to early stage capital through angel investors, through venture capitalists, through corporate investment, all in one program, which is very, very unique. And so the idea is that if you bring together all these pieces that entrepreneurs sort of like struggle to find on their own, it would significantly be able to accelerate their growth, because all the time that they would spend looking for all these different pieces, it comes together in like one cohort, one program. And then even beyond that, you form part of a network that you originally wasn't part of. And that network thereafter has a significant amount of network effect between the entrepreneurs and the mentors, between the entrepreneurs and the corporates and the investors. So that sort of network effect that occurs even beyond the program is what I believe really sees that accelerated growth of these companies. And so that's what's really important.
So there's a second time that you said network effect. I don't know if you sort of realize that. And one of the things we want to make sure that folks on the show are aware of is, let's say, Y Combinator, right? So can you tell us about Y Combinator for those that don't know, especially teenagers as well, because that's very interesting sort of prospect for them. And I'll tell a story about what I just recently learned.
Yeah. So Y Combinator is known as like the grandfather of accelerator programs. And this program is one of the earliest ones to dub the term accelerator program. And some of the best companies would have come through that program. I believe it was maybe about like 10 to 15 years ago. So within relative recent time sort of thing, and spawn a series of companies coming through that program to having multi-billion-dollar valuations and then going public and that sort of thing. It really just came from the thesis that, like I said before, that sort of network effect for these entrepreneurs that are coming in can really yield some really productive outcomes.
Yes, I just actually wanted to highlight maybe some of the companies that came through Y Combinator: Airbnb, DoorDash, Coinbase, Dropbox, Stripe, Instacart, Reddit. Let's see.
Reddit, I think, was like one of the first cohorts.
And one of the reasons I kind of like you making sure that you highlight what Y Combinator is and the possibilities for the Caribbean. There's a story about this guy named Gary Tan. And at 14 years old, he was in Silicon Valley, but he started cold calling a bunch of people and he got like a programming job. Eventually that led him into startups and led him into Y Combinator. So he had his first startup there. He gained his network and coming back to that network effects, his startup didn't work out, but he ended up becoming a partner at Y Combinator. And that led him to be one of the early investors in Coinbase, right?
Correct.
And
yeah.
so
we know what that means. Yeah.
Exactly. So there's an insane amount of opportunity that you're creating in what you're building. So that's quite exciting. What would you say to folks about how they can apply, or is your cohort sort of full at this moment, and what your plans are for, like, let's say the next 6 months?
Yeah. So how it works is that we run a 8-week cohort program. And so the first cohort just completed. We're going to run into the second cohort in September and close off there for the year after the 8 weeks from September. So that'll be September, October, finish early November, thereabout. And prepare for what 2022 is going to look like, whereby we may do 3 cohorts in 2022. But yeah, the application process is simple. You go onto the website, techbeach.net. You go across to the accelerator programs and you hit apply, and we begin filtering through companies that have applicability for the type of support that we can provide, and what we're looking for. And we are a Caribbean and Latin America focused accelerator program. So we've had companies in our first cohort from Puerto Rico and DR,
Nice.
and from across the region and the US. So our goal really is to have some really amazing companies come out through the program and really begin seeing some major star players across the region in that way. And we really want to work, and we're really working on a greater integration between Latin America and the Caribbean. The American Development Bank is our partner in executing this, and a large portion of their focus, actually the largest portion of their focus, is on Latin America. And they work really, really hard on trying to have us integrate a lot more. And we work in that way as well, to try to have a great integration between our Latin American counterparts and the Caribbean. And the only barrier is language and just knowing Spanish. A lot of the culture really overlaps, and a lot of the challenges really overlap. And as Caribbean people, we tend to look to the US so much for things, but in reality, a lot of similarities exist in Colombia, exist in Puerto Rico, exist in DR, and that sort of thing that mirror that Caribbean culture, flavor, challenges, and that sort of thing.
Perfect. So coming back to like Latin America and the Caribbean, those are really big markets sort of combined, right? And what do you think, because of the differences in culture, that people need to keep in mind when they go try to do business in these different regions versus, let's say, opening a company in America or, some other very big established tech hub, sorry.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing to bear in mind is the challenges, right? From the perspective that they don't have this super thriving ecosystem as well, They may be more advanced than where we are in the Caribbean, but they still as well look to the Silicon Valleys as the baseline examples. We're now beginning to see some unicorn companies come through South America and that sort of thing. And so the progression isn't quite where they'd want it to be, and they still hold the US at a certain holy grail level. And so bear in mind that those challenges still really exist, but what there is significant opportunity. Yeah, because there are so many problems that are yet to be solved, yet to have market leaders for, and we're really excited to see even some of our companies from our region begin going to play in some of these markets, so that that validation that they have coming from our region can be deployed within some of those markets, and begin seeing some of our companies see some of that astronomical growth.
Wow, good to know. And one of the things that I've always thought a lot about the Caribbean, right? There's tons of English speakers, at least when you think of it as an auxiliary market to the American market. Let's say for remote work is sort of in style right now. So what advantages do you think the Caribbean has in its ecosystem in terms of the global marketplace? Is it the culture? What do you think, sort of separates us? And when I say separates us, means allows us to play on that stage?
Yeah. I think the appeal of working by a beach is something many people relate with, right? And during the height of the pandemic last year, I know a lot of people that moved from Silicon Valley to the Caribbean to work from home, quote unquote. And that sort of appeal is something that we can significantly capitalize on. One country in particular, Barbados, created this special visa that allowed people to work from Barbados for a year, you know? And the caliber of people that are able to pick up themselves and go to another country and operate like normal, or generally high quality talent, that are making good capital that they can move wherever they are. And so so you have, if countries operate well within a region, they have this opportunity to attract some really high caliber talent with high spending flexibility, that are going to be able to be high producing, high consumers in the country, and very productive in that way, to become to do all sorts of types of work within the country. And once they create ways for them to integrate and not have them be on the fringes, I think is a really, really genuine opportunity that countries in the region, if they're aggressive, they can capitalize on.
Yes, and hopefully, one of these days, all of the words that you're saying get up to sort of the heads of government, and they open up visas for everybody to come work from the beach. That would be nice. And what I wanted to kind of hop into, I know you've told your story to many different people in terms of maybe all the different businesses that you've started, and especially TechBeach Retreat. Can you highlight some of the brands that you've been able to bring to the Caribbean through this, through your company? And I think it's worth noting that I don't think anyone else has done this in the region.
Yeah, I think I mentioned it when I was describing it before, right? Last year, well, not last year, in 2019, we struck up a partnership with Google in a pretty significant way. I think I know it's the largest partnership for an event in the region that they've ever done. We have the year before with Facebook and Instagram, with Twitter. This year we have with AWS. We're finalizing with MasterCard, Visa as well. Nice. Focus on fintechs that come through our program. Shopify. Yeah, so we have a suite of some of the top tier technology companies that we've partnered with previously and are in partnerships with currently for our accelerator program, and then running into when we begin having summits again. We're working possibly on for one this year.
Okay. That'll be nice.
We'll have a suite of them for 2022.
Perfect. So I wanted to hop into your journey a little bit. And most people may not know that you and I sort of went to high school together. So I know a deeper story than maybe most know, but kind of give us a journey from high school up until now. And I think one of the things that I like about your story is I know the type of student that you were, right? You were not just like myself, A grade, super studious. Like we were quite a big bunch of slackers, but yet we've been able to, sort of come out okay, I would say. So kind of tell us about your journey from high school up until now. And then the reason I kind of highlight that is for just to help some of the teenagers that maybe struggle like us with formal schooling, and how you sort of chart your own path in the world.
Yeah. I look back on my time in school, and I think it really prepared me to be an entrepreneur, because I've always struggled with ADD, right? Being able to sit still and focus in a classroom and just consume that information in that way. And you and I would not pay attention so much in class and then go home and just be studying, just learning all the work, and that training of yourself to teach yourself has been the biggest takeaway to become an entrepreneur, and I don't think enough credence is given to that student that goes away and learns that subject matter on their own and figures out what their learning style is, because the current structure of how things are taught doesn't really relate with them. Like one of the biggest takeaways for me, like in my life, like I've always taken with me is how we took physics when I was actually like kicked out of physics class from Mr. Fitzpatrick. And he just thought like I was a slacker and I didn't have like, I just couldn't do it or whatever. And I ended up getting a distinction in physics. And that distinction in physics came because you and I studied together, right?
Yes.
So,
Mm-hmm.
so we go home, we learn all the past papers, we do all the work together. And what is happening there instinctively is that we're teaching ourselves how to learn, right? Versus sitting down in a class and you're consuming the information, you go home, you do the homework or whatever. When we're learning it from scratch, we are like forming our own understandings of it versus what is fed to us. And that sort of approach to learning on your own and teaching yourself how to learn, it really took me into that part of entrepreneurship whereby I wasn't afraid to learn anything new. And so now with TechBeach, I'm on my sixth company and I've covered so many different industries, from energy efficiency and making buildings more sustainable and energy efficient, getting into that space, executing over 1 million square feet of building space and making it more energy efficient across the Caribbean, exiting that company to starting a company in business search, a search platform, gaining like $2 million investment for that company. And that being my first big failure, but it was my first big, like actually my second really big win as well. And then moving into a digital marketing agency, and then moving into ecosystem, like so many different industries. Technology being like the cross-cutting thing, but it's just my like willingness to not have any fear going into a space because I'm like, I'll just figure it out, I'll just figure it out. So to that student that doesn't really fit the mold and goes home and puts in the work to really figure out like how to get something done, I think the biggest takeaway is grit. It's just that determination to just go and figure something out and figure out like what works for you.
One of the interesting things that comes to mind in that story, and it's very applicable to what you're doing now, is this notion of having peers, just learning in a certain environment, super collaborative, to be honest. And you mentioned you and I studied, right? So it was both you and I learning together in this like environment where it was okay to ask all the silly questions and say, I don't know this, and someone can help you out. So I think you have now taken that to the professional level where all of these startups are put together and everyone's beating their head against the wall, and now they're trying to figure out sort of what to do. So it's nice to see that those same principles from high school and all the things that you learn when it comes to interacting with your peers and executing actually have real benefits in the real professional world.
Yeah. I think people underestimate it. What I'm like really known for is my ability to network, right? And I think these things start from when you're in high school, and they don't give enough recognition and credence to a lot of the other skills that are required in order for you to succeed. My first hire in my company was a guy who came first in industrial engineering in UE, and he was top rated in CIC, and I was not top rated in CIC, right? Yep. CIC being St. Mary's College, our high school. And my first hire was the guy who was number one,
Right.
And I'd always look back at that and I'm like, it's crazy that you would have never really projected that the guy who was perceived as like the slacker in school hires the guy who was number one in school, So
yes.
I think school doesn't really give us that understanding of what is actually possible and what goes on in the real world,
So you went to school briefly for aerospace engineering, and the reason why I sort of bring that up is I think that gave you the opportunity to see a different world, right? Yeah. And also maybe pursue something, let's say, super technical. And one of the things I wanted to re-highlight on the show is, we brought on, data scientists, folks who are CTOs, folks who are product managers, some who've come from a super technical background. I would say you've had some technical training there, but even without that, you've been able to take a lot of the principles that you've learned to build all of these businesses. So give us some thoughts there, and for folks who may not be as technical, but you're leading sort of the push in tech, right?
Yeah. So I think overall my inclination has always been towards technical and technology related things, right? So going to school to study aerospace engineering and spending that time there and building those sort of relationships and that understanding of that engineer's mindset of problem solving and that commitment to always believing that there is a solution to every problem, regardless of sometimes there isn't always. But that determination to want to figure things out is one of like my biggest takeaways from my time in university in that way, you know. Then starting my first company in school was I think one of my biggest takeaways because it allowed me to start a company, begin marketing, hire people, begin generating revenue, pay US taxes, and then when you leave and wind up the company and that sort of thing. Like, so taking yourself through that entire experience was one of my biggest takeaways from university as well.
So you started a business while in school
Yeah.
and, sort of grinded that out. And can you talk to us about co-founders, right? I think one thing that's very unique about you is, people say don't get into business with your family, but a lot of your businesses are built with some of your family members as well. So tell us some of the lessons there and in terms of having that solid peer group to push you forward. That's one thing that I've noticed about your journey is that you have a core group that, your role, that's a team essentially. So tell us about that team.
Yeah, I think I've been blessed to have a lot of really good friends that become family to me. And in some instances, I've been blessed to be able to work with them in companies that we've built. And so what Mark is referring to is a core group of my brother and my two best friends, and we started like 4 companies together, and have gone through so many cycles of business, from winning and generating a lot of revenue and doing really well to boom, busting and not doing so well and figuring it out and cleaning it up and reinventing ourselves, like all within the time space of a decade of 10 years, which is crazy. And we started this journey in 2011. And we've been through so much over the last 10 years. It's crazy. Having hired in that time in excess of maybe like 150 to 200 people in that time.
So many?
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely. Across the companies, having generated and raised capital in excess of $5-6 million US. And within the region, that's amazing. Outside the region, that's passe,
Yeah.
So we don't feel super amazing because like we benchmark ourselves on so much higher standards. But I think within the region we've done quite a bit, covered a lot of ground, and that sort of thing. And so it's been quite an amazing experience to be able to have those sounding boards. And as they say, iron sharpens iron. And we begin pushing ourselves beyond what we even believe. Actually, we have such ambitions. We believe anything is possible,
Yeah. And, if any of you get to know Kyle and his core group of friends very well, I went to school with all of them. There is a certain, what's the word I'm thinking? There's a certain shield in terms of they don't allow certain thoughts to come in, right? And there's this intense optimism of what is possible that I think is almost critical to your success in the region. So, just wanted folks to take that lesson away to be critically sort of optimistic there.
Yeah.
You are one of the best networkers I know. And kind of tell us about the importance of that. I think everyone knows networking is kind of important, but in my mind, from what I've seen, it's one of the things that has been foundational to you growing the brand in the region and having quite a lot of impact.
Yeah. So I think I'm an anomaly in the space of I've a couple like beliefs that maybe so a lot of people don't share. In the sense that I believe people are inherently good,
Mm-hmm.
average, and I think when people act in ways that are not good, it's just because due to a short-sightedness in their view and not being able to see the entire picture, not being able to do things that act in their own enlightened self-interest, because they can't see that whole picture and they act emotionally. And so there's this phrase that my dad always told me: the more you understand, the more you forgive. And when you begin seeing people more as human beings that are fragile and not having the entire picture a lot of the times, you don't take things so personally. You don't personalize things that happen to you and think it's they're doing something to you. It's a lot of times they're just reacting based on their experiences, what they've been through, how they see the picture. They're seeing life in terms of one side of the Rubik's Cube, when the reality, life is more like a Rubik's Cube with what 8 different faces, and so they're only seeing one side and believe that that's the one side. So these are some of the philosophies that I live by that allow me to be so, I guess, understanding, patient, tolerant of so many different types of people. And I genuinely like people. Some people don't like people. So,
Right.
so, so for me, that ability to network really goes from, all right, I have to network as a job, as a chore, like, I should know more people, to like, I just like talking to people. I just like talking to people. I like hearing their stories. I like hearing what they've been through. I'm inspired by hearing people triumph over problems, hearing nuances and different stories that people go through in their lives. And people like telling their story, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert. If it's one thing people like doing, is telling their unique story, where they're from, what they've been through. You could meet somebody who is like the most talkative person in the world. Clearly, he's going to talk, right? But then you can meet that introvert, that person that doesn't really talk to anybody and really has like that core tiny group of friends, or just themselves, really stays to themselves. But if you spend enough time with that person, you realize that that person actually likes to tell their story too, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And me coming in with that approach of just genuinely just wanting to listen and understand, it makes it, I guess, easier for me to be able to build relationships with people. And we tend to build deeper, genuine relationships that go beyond what you do for a living and what you're trying to accomplish. And so I tend to know people across so many different spaces in that way, because that's the approach that I take. But what is practical for someone to take away that isn't me, that is, don't hold these sort of like strong philosophies in that way and genuinely like people? I think if you're a regular person who isn't as extreme, because I realize like I'm by no means normal in that sense. I think baseline is be curious about other people, a lot of times when people want to network, they're always thinking about what they can get out of something. I think the first fundamental principle of networking is figuring out what value you can add to the other person, and if you go into every interaction with how can you add value to this person, you're going to realize that the interactions, the quality of interaction, the quality of people that you're able to meet and spur on is going to be exponential, because how that works is the network effect of, I thought about how I can add value to Mark. I eventually did add value to Mark. Mark eventually believes that, hey, this guy is valuable to me, and I, quote unquote, like owe him something, or like to work with him in some way, or partner with him, or do something with him because he takes interest in me. And that network effect plays on. Mark then introduces me to somebody, and then introduces me to somebody else, and that sort of thing. And that's the sort of network effect that occurs when you go in with how can you give versus how can you take,
Yep. I appreciate you highlighting that, simply because this very podcast, I would say, is a pure function of, I don't want to call it networking. I would say connecting with other people.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not a super big fan of the word networking, because I think inherently it implies like, hey, you're just kind of doing this for whatever reason. So a story I kind of wanted to share of the value of, let's call it connecting and networking, is how we met one of the other speakers, one of the other guests on the show, Larry Hercules.
Yeah.
I was into conferences, and for anyone who's just getting started in your career, volunteer for as many conferences as possible. That opens many doors, introduces you to many people. Like Kyle said, you have to add value first, right, before you sort of hope to gain entry into someone's network. And I flew to San Francisco on a whim, and I was just walking through some crowd in some networking event, and I heard a Trinidadian accent. And the thing I want everyone to remember is like, use your culture to connect with people, like as many different things that you can use. So I look at Larry and I'm like, where are you from? And he kind of looks at me. If you ever meet Larry, he's a very tall person, and he gives you this kind of look like, who are you type thing. And from there, he was very genuine to us. We connected. And I think if you struggle with thinking, what do you have to offer to people when you meet them, your connections are another thing. So I was in school. I didn't have anything sort of going on. I knew Kyle was, entrepreneur, like on steroids, and he always needed to meet, more high caliber people. So I introduced him to Larry, and given that he's one of the true connectors out there, he took that relationship and made it blossom. So kind of tell us, after you met Larry, I guess you went to Silicon Valley more often, and that led to more things.
Yeah. So what we're talking about here, in essence, is just that power of networking, right? And what that eventually leads to. And you really, that quote by Steve Jobs, you could never connect the dots looking forward, but looking back, things make so much more sense. And Mark connected me with Hercules, and Hercules ended up becoming Larry. Hercules is his name, and I call him right here. Because I feel like his impact has been Herculean in my life, So I call him Hercules way more than I call him Larry. So Herc, connecting with Herc ended up being my node. That first point of connection in Silicon Valley when I was building out TechBeach in 2016. That first person that I knew that connected me to a lot of different people. When I had no connection points, I actually had two friends. I had one friend, Hercules, who was in the tech industry, to connect me. And then I had one friend, Haley Brown, that was my friend from college, who gave me a place to stay, right? And so Haley wasn't in tech. Haley just was like, yo, Kyle, you can come out here, you can stay by me, don't worry about it. And having those two types of people were definitely the biggest blessing for me in the trajectory that I took on with TechBeach, because I was able to leverage staying in San Francisco for months at a time without having to worry about paying San Francisco rent or staying at an Airbnb and paying thousands of dollars, which wouldn't have been practical. I would have just ended up going there for a few days at a time and coming back home, because that would have been the most practical that I could have afforded. So being able to stay there for weeks on end, months on end, stay there for like a couple of months on end, really set the stage for building this new platform, that TechBeach retreat that I was working on. And Hercules opening up his Rolodex and taking me to events, taking me to parties, taking me to dinners, lunch. Like, he's like, bro, meet me here, meet me there, and me just taking those things and running with it on my own, it's really important that entrepreneurs need to take away. Is that, like, nobody's going to do the work for you, The most that somebody can do is open those doors, but it's up to you to run through that door with everything that you can and really make that into something. I remember one of the first conferences I went to, I met this guy who started this company called Listener. His name is Rodney Williams. And I never, you don't see Black people winning in tech so much now. You like the typical faces that you see in technology generally are your standard white male, right? And Rodney is now, I believe, got this patent for this type of technology. And just hearing his story early on in my journey was really inspirational. And Rodney wouldn't even know this. Fast forward, what it would be 3 years later, Rodney is at TechBeach.
Wow.
And I never forecasted that I would have met him. I would have interact with him in that way and be able to have a platform for him to come to in that way. I was just sitting down in the audience like, wow, this guy is like killing it, man. Like one day that'll be me. Yeah, one day. And so all of this network effect occur because like that you took it upon yourself to meet Hercules, to introduce me to Hercules. Yeah.
Yeah, and I appreciate you sort of sharing that story, because if I didn't necessarily take some chances, and the thing I want people to take away is, as Kyle said, you never really know how things are going to work out. And I just went out there and did something, turned into a lot of different things. And the other story I wanted to share was, so Kyle met Hook, TechBeach is going well. I randomly networked at some other conference, and because I'm from Trinidad, or using that Caribbean heritage, I don't like to call it to my advantage, but using it, because I'm from that region, I met another gentleman called Michael Montano, and I was like, hey, Kyle just needs to know as many people. So I'm just like, sending people to Kyle, because I can't necessarily add much value other than that. And Kyle took that particular connection, and that led to something quite interesting. Can you share that tidbit?
Yeah, man. That was my most powerful connection yet. Once again, thanks again, Mark.
I bring in more, don't worry.
Yeah. Like I said, you can never connect dots. You can never connect dots to looking forward. You can only connect them looking back, and you just act with faith and belief that you keep putting good into the world, you're going to be able to get good out of it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So Mark from this connection introduced me to Michael over email. It's like, so met Mike, nice to meet you, whatever. I'll probably be in San Francisco in the next few weeks. Maybe I'll meet up. Ended up going to San Francisco in June. Ended up going to meet Mike. Say, Mike, hey, I'm in town. Let's meet up. Mike said, hey, let's meet up at the Twitter building, but in the coffee shop downstairs. And if you know most of these technology companies, you have breakfast that's free, lunch that's free. And so I was really excited to go in to see what Twitter breakfast was like. I've been to Google, I've been to Facebook and that sort of thing. And so I was kind of excited to see, all right, let's see what Twitter is like. And Mike asked me to meet downstairs in Blue Bottle Coffee. And I was like, all right, cool, fine. I guess we'll meet downstairs in the coffee shop. Got there to the coffee shop with me and my business partner, Kirk. And third in line getting coffee was the CEO of Twitter, Jack Dorsey. And so I don't get like starstruck, but I really love entrepreneurs that are like going out there and changing the world. And so guys like Elon and Jack are like some of my top entrepreneurs. And so when I saw him, I was like, Kirk, go ahead and talk to this guy. He's like, who's he? I was like, Jack Dorsey, and the man building. He was like, all right. Cool. Why don't you go talk to him? I was like, nah, bro. You go talk to him. So Kirk went to introduce himself to him. And I was like, so then he told him what we were building. And Jack took the time to listen, which was really surprising, right? He came out the line and was listening to what we were saying. And we told him that we're building this platform to connect the Caribbean to global ecosystems. A lot of the networks that you take for granted in the Silicon Valley, we really want to bring that to the region to really help companies really accelerate their growth in that way. And he said, yeah, this sounds interesting. And then he said, hey, let me introduce you to my business partner, Kyle. And I was like, oh, yeah. Hey, I'm Kyle. Good to meet you. And told him I was from Trinidad. And he said, wow, he used to go to Trinidad, most of Tobago, up until the age of 16. And I was like, wow, that's crazy. His mom used to take him. And then I said, well, hey, the conference that we're building actually is in Jamaica. And he was like, he's never been to Jamaica. And so he said, here's what, this sounds interesting. Shoot me an email. I said, what's your email? He's like, Jack at Twitter. I was like, oh, that's obvious. Jack at Twitter, and we'll hear about it. And we'll discuss it and we'll see what comes out of it. And to be honest, in that moment, you're just thinking that, it's too good to be true. Like, you're not thinking that it's possible. He's probably give everybody his email. Probably won't respond. So we took a picture. Mike came in. Mike was like, oh, I guess you guys met. And I was like, yeah, Mike. Mike took a picture of us. And then we went upstairs to the Twitter building and had breakfast, which was crazy. Mike could have just invited us upstairs in the first place, but you just trust in the process. Where the whole reason of me ended up downstairs was to meet Jack. And then we ended up having breakfast upstairs, and we emailed Jack when I got back to my apartment. Next day, Jack responded, copying his assistant, saying that, "Hey, Kyle, we've blocked out these dates on Jack's calendar. Please keep us posted."
That's always good.
And man, I could pee myself. I was so freaking excited because this is year 2 of a conference that we're building, a network that we're building. And he decided to come, not knowing us, never been to the region before. And a lot of people think like we paid him. It was unpaid. Like I couldn't afford to pay the CEO of Twitter and Square to fly on his private jet to come to my event. Is unheard of. And yeah, fast forward 6 months later to December, Jack flew his private jet, brought 9 of his friends, pull up with Range Rovers to my event. And he jumped out. He's like, "Hey, Kyle, long time no see." And I was like, wow, this man is just so chill. And he became my favorite entrepreneur. Hands down.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the moral of that story is you could be super technical, you could be a great entrepreneur, but make sure that you are trying to connect meaningfully with as many people as possible. And I think the quote Hook in one of his interviews, you have to shoot your shot, right? I think oftentimes in life, you only get one opportunity to sort of do something, and that can really change things. So another story I kind of wanted to highlight, and I know we're spending a little time on the story, I think it has a lot of roots for us being from the Caribbean, but also the power of connections. So like we went through the whole Hook thing. I met Kyle. Kyle calls me like 2 years later. Conference is going well. I'm sitting in a little lab, like doing my PhD, regretting, I'm just like, why am I in this little lab? And Kyle is, billing conferences, meeting all these people, and I'm in just this one room. So just sharing that story, that was tough. But anyway, I was working at a railroad company, and Kyle was like, "Hey, you want to come to San Francisco and, go meet some speakers?" And I was like, okay. So I take vacation. I pay my way to go out to San Francisco to meet Kyle. And, he introduced me to the CEO, Will Hayes of LucidWorks, that became my other company. So like 3 weeks later, I had a 6-figure salary working remote. And I'm like, wow, almost 3 years after I made an initial introduction, that completely changed the trajectory of my particular career and introduced me to many sort of other people. So you really never know what's out there for you. But ultimately, I think us being from the Caribbean, us being, we talked to a lot of people that I think came a little more naturally to us than some other folks. Yeah. But regardless, leverage the Caribbean connections that you have to, make your life better. So one of the things I kind of wanted to hop into now is that you did First. First was a sort of search platform for businesses in the Caribbean, and you shared some stories about you tried to go hyper growth and it didn't necessarily sort of work out, and then you pivoted. So can you talk to us about what you pivoted into after that, and like how did you sort of like, hey, this didn't work out, and you faced yourself with your team and you sort of overcame that?
So with First, what First was a search platform, kind of like Yelp, with the goal of allowing people to land in any country in the region, be able to search for businesses, see reviews, see pictures of that business. And the goal eventually was to allow those businesses to sell their products online, or for you to make bookings of services online. And so that's a trajectory that we're going down with First. Unfortunately, it didn't pan out in that way because we took this really aggressive approach to growth, grow at all costs, with the assumption, hope that we'd be able to raise further funding based on how much we've been able to grow. But you slapped in the face really early in our region with the lack of access to capital for things, companies like ours. So when our company Digicel wasn't able to follow on with investment because the guy who led the investment in us, he got cancer. He's still alive, but he wasn't able to function in that way for us anymore. We ran out of cash. We ran out of cash, and we weren't able to grow in the way that we wanted to anymore. And so it ended up tumbling down in that way, and ended up being my first big failure. And out of that experience, we did a really amazing job at marketing the brand, and people really loved what First represented for them in the region. And a lot of companies reached out to us. Well, we generated revenue through advertising on the platform, and we did just under $1 million in revenue, so like $960,000 in sales in our first 10 months, which was phenomenal. But we had a high burn rate. So regardless of all that money we had coming in, we had more going out.
Yep.
And when things didn't work out, we were able to like sift through some of the top companies that really liked working with us and really liked what we were able to sell. And a few of them asked me to begin working with them on their digital marketing strategy. And so I managed to turn First into a digital marketing agency and have quite a number of these high-powered clients as my clients, and me building out their digital marketing roadmap and teaching them about customer acquisition and that sort of thing in e-commerce that they wouldn't have been have knowledge on in that way. And then helping them with the social media and digital marketing. So connecting the Facebook, Google, email marketing sort of thing together for them in that way that they really didn't really have an understanding of at that point in time. And so build this marketing agency, and the marketing agency ended up being the cash cow that allowed me to build TechBeach, which I believe is more closely aligned to my purpose and overall greater value to the region and hopefully to the world in that way. So I was that was the major pivot that occurred, and it was more of a survival thing, like, so how am I going to pay my bills now that this is not it?
Yeah, I think another interesting thing about your story is what companies have you worked for?
Oh, as in like a job.
Yeah. Tell me, who's employed you so far?
I've never had a job before.
Yeah, I think that's one of the other cool things about Cal's story as well. And not to say that being employed is a bad thing, right? But for those of you that have that tenacious attitude, please add Kyle's story to your data points. One thing that I wanted to highlight as well is, co-founders. And, your co-founder for TechBeach Retreat is in Jamaica, right? So you guys are distributed. I'm sure you sort of meet up on some regular cadence. Kind of tell us what should folks who are thinking of startups, building businesses, but have this distributed sort of relationship with a co-founder. Any thoughts there?
What do you mean a distributed relationship?
Meaning like he's in Jamaica, you're in Trinidad. Like you can't just like go down the road and have dinner and discuss stuff. You have to call on the phone and
I think that's one of the cool stories about me building TechBeach. Kirk and I, we met before, but Kirk called me up in 2015 to work on building this conference platform, and I really wasn't into it at that point in time because I was working on First. We had raised capital, and then called me up afterwards, and still wasn't a good time because I was just feeling like shit that I had to send him a bunch of people and it was a big failure and it didn't work out. So my mental space wasn't there necessarily, but he was like really persistent in wanting to work with me on this thing. And when I agreed in 2015 and then started working on it in 2016, we didn't meet until December 2016 for the first event, which is crazy. And throughout the lifetime of building TechBeach, we'd probably physically be in the same space as each other for maybe 2 or 3 months total of the year at a time, like cumulatively. And that's from me spending weeks and sometimes months in San Francisco, but him not having that ability to do that. He'd come in for a week or a couple of weeks or whatever. And then meeting up in New York for a week or so. And I have family in New York that I could stay for extended periods of time. And so he never having that ability to like stay for as long. We would connect in those cities for pieces of time and then connect in Jamaica. He'd come to Trinidad. So like for short stints in different cities around the region in that way, but never concerted time shoulder to shoulder working. We just have like objectives that we would like to achieve, and all of these objectives could be achieved without having to physically go into an office in that way. And yeah, we just crush it.
Solid. Done. I think for everyone listening, add that to your sort of data points of, let's call it a remote company or distributed company. And before we sort of switch into something different, can you highlight Chef Made? Right, that's another company that you helped co-found, and I know some of your family members who cook really well, and tell us how you took that and scaled it.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So Chef Made is a food meal prep company where my sister's the head chef. She's done amazing at building a local brand for herself in the quality of food that she's able to make. And me spending so much time like in Silicon Valley and in New York and these sort of things, seeing these meal companies be able to scale and do really well, and me being a customer of them was home, and I was like, there's no way that she's going to be able to continue in this trajectory for the rest of her life. She needs to be able to build something that's a lot more sustainable, that doesn't have her in the kitchen 100% of the time and trading her hours for dollars in that way. She needs to build something that's a lot more scalable, that she's able to take herself out of an engine that grows. And so we started Chef Made with the goal really of allowing people to eat healthy with just a few clicks. I'm going to the website, choose from our healthy meal options, which was limited at that time. We had about 10 to 15 menu items. Now our menu is maybe like 40 items. Actually, I think we need to cut down, quite frankly, and just tighten up the menu a bit. But it's really exploded from just healthy things to like gourmet things to even some tasty treats that aren't as healthy, so that we capture a wide audience of anything that people want, really. So if you're having a Friday night lime, as we say in Trinidad, or hang out with friends, you can have some barbecue wings and ribs and that sort of thing. Or if you really are on that strict diet, we have keto type meals, and we have meals that are perfectly measured to the specifications. And then for people that are dealing with health issues, we cater to a lot of diabetic, hypertension, high blood pressure, and cancer patients as well. And so we've created this really wide menu that is able to cater to these unique needs of people in this way, that they just go on with a few taps and the food is at your door within like 48, 72 hours sometimes maximum. Yeah.
Great. And, thanks I think for folks listening, right? If you looked at Kyle when he started in high school and his journey throughout, right? Starting a search platform for businesses, a digital marketing agency, a food company, then a conference platform that it initially started as, into a tech accelerator, a globally connected tech accelerator for the Caribbean and Latin America by proxy. So thanks for sharing that piece of your journey. And I wanted to shift into a topic that kind of leads off what you just said in terms of healthy. I think one thing I don't hear a lot about from many entrepreneurs is keeping a focus on health. A nice little tidbit story. I think Kyle and I started working out at age 14 in my backyard in the gym, and I think that's one thing I'm sort of grateful for. And my parents instilling in me is that value of continuing to work out regardless of sort of what you have on your plate. Can you share maybe how that has led to success in your journey?
Yeah, I think quite frankly, you being a mentor for me in that way, whether it was actively when we first started or not as actively, just based on seeing how you live your life, has been a really big impact on me in that way. And even the impetus of starting not TechBeach, starting Chef Made, to really help my dad who's struggling with eating healthy to eat more healthy in that way as well. And so it's something that, as I guess, like engineers and entrepreneurs, um, I think when you're studying a really tough technical degree in school, because it's the same thing with like doctors, lawyers as well, um, that you just kind of put everything into the thing that you're working on, you know, and you give very little credence to sleep, to eating well, to working out. Um, and the outcome of that really is that you can survive when you're younger. And so you kind of get away with it in your 20s, in your early 20s. But as you get older, you begin seeing the impact on you. And it's really begin really understanding the true importance of understanding the things that you put into your body is really give you the output of what you're able to do in that day, you know? So if you sleep for 4 hours versus getting your regular 6 to 8 hours sleep, like the outcome in that day is going to be really crappy. When I was a lot younger, like, we used to like take pride in me and sleep. I didn't sleep, like, and just go in, and versus when you get a bit older now, like every single thing that you do and you put into your routine yields the outcome of what you're able to do on a given day, And so you end up becoming a lot more thoughtful and a lot more methodical in what you're able to put in. And so, especially within this last year of COVID lockdown for me, I take pride in saying that I haven't gained any weight, and I've been struggling with working out in the last year because my mind really has been struggling with trying to do well, keep the business running. And then my dad just passed and dealing with the fact that he would pass. So I realized I was mourning his death even before, and that became stressful for me. But in that time, what I know that I was able to have control over is what I put into my body and how I sleep. And so I've been very methodical in every morning. I have smoothies, I juice, making sure I have 1 to 2 liters of water a day kind of thing. Cut out flour out of my regular diet. And so flour is like a treat. So it's not that I will never have pizza. It's that like on Friday or Saturday kind of thing, you'll have some pizza, but I don't buy bread, I don't buy sugar, I don't buy juice. So you cut out these things out of your regular diet because you realize that the impact these things have on your body, it really just slows you down, like, because you just consume so much of it and you don't realize that sugar is in so many things, and flour is so many things. And these are like the two really poor things that end up slowing you down significantly. And with me taking that sort of mental approach and taking that active approach to drinking my vegetables, drinking my fruits. So my smoothie this morning would have kale and broccoli with some banana in it to give it a little sweetness and some apples, really focusing on that sort of consumption in that way allow me to not gain any weight, feel good still, and feel really like in control of my diet and in control of my health in that way, for sure.
Yeah, and health is it's a very interesting thing. I think we're sort of conditioned to pursue riches.
Yeah,
We're sort of conditioned to like build big and you'll gain all this money and then you'll retire early, and but if your body's broken down, like nothing, it's not worth it. And suffering is not it's not a nice thing. So I wanted to shift quickly as we start winding down. This is the Caribbean Data Science Podcast. Our pure intention is to highlight the stories of people from the Caribbean diaspora that are building things at home and are doing things abroad, and outside of the space of machine learning as well, because without the tech ecosystem that you're building, nobody really needs machine learning. It's not going to operate. with all that? And how can we get more people in the Caribbean and even more so the Caribbean diaspora to get into the field of tech and machine learning? And the other caveat I'll add to that is, what do you sort of foresee the impact of machine learning and AI in the region in the next, so just later on?
Yeah. So how do we get, so the first question is, how do we get more people? I think a sensitization needs to occur, and the things that you're doing really add to that, right? I think people don't realize a lot of the times how to get into an industry and how to get into a space. And they have a lot of perceptions that limit them from entering, a lot of people aren't like you and I in that respect, where kind of just bold and you'll just like figure it out. You just jump into space and you're like, I'll figure it out. They allow a lot of perceptions of the space to kind of limit what they actually end up doing. And so I think what's really important is a lot of Q&As, a lot of events, a lot of things that really reach the people where they're at on the different platforms, the Twitter spaces, the Instagram interviews, the podcasts, giving people various types of content that would allow them to really get a peek behind the curtains into what happens, how it comes to pass, the types of people that enter into the space, not seeing one archetype of people. So representation matters. So seeing the different races, the different backgrounds, the different education learning styles, so people might have a belief that only a X type person is a data scientist, and so having that sort of range that allows people to get drawn in because they begin seeing themselves in somebody else is super, super important. So I think what you're doing here, showing the various types of people within the space and showing really how the space all comes together, is super important. And kudos to you on putting this together. And so the next piece is in terms of impact. I think artificial intelligence and the application of AI in our lives is going to be like what the internet was to us, right? Because it's now the internet on steroids, whereby everything becomes super smart, like everything becomes an internet of thing, because now your bed can adjust based on how your sleeping patterns are, like everything becomes smart. Yeah. And so like your kids are going to be growing up and going up to a door and like asking like, why doesn't this door open when I get here? Why does this teacup not reheat? Because it realizes it's cold, like what kind of dumb teacup is this? Like my tea keeps getting cold, like everything is going to be a smart something. And that is because of the application of AI, which was on the layer of the application of the internet, which was on the layer of the application of broadband technology, the ability to have super fast things. And so as we now enter into 5G speeds, and then we're going to go beyond that at some point in time, as the internet speeds continue to just hit like breakneck speeds, it allows so much more bandwidth, so much more technology to come through the pipeline in that way, that so many more things can be connected without that latency that occurs even now when we try to do different things, right? And so as that latency gets as close to zero as possible, probably not be zero, but it tends towards zero, so much to be able to come through that pipeline that we'll have such an interconnected experience that it's crazy, like it's mind-boggling to think about, that every piece of your life will be connected with technology in some way. And what I'm most excited about is the impact that it will have on our health. I think health has been like the laggard in terms of technology disruption because there's so much regulation as it relates. But I'm looking forward to the day whereby I put food on my plate and it says too much of this and too little of that, and and so you're so much more thoughtful of the things that you put in. You eat it and you're able to see how much of it actually digests in your body, and so you're able to choose foods based on your body and your digestion. But right now we kind of just a lot of the times wing it. Even for the people that really understand, it's still a certain level of like so much iteration, and so that's what I'm looking forward to globally, and the impact obviously that is going to have on mankind in that way, regardless of where we are.
Yeah, machine learning, especially in healthcare, I think when you think of ways of measuring the health of your body, what's
Yeah.
sort of exciting is the biomarkers and the conclusions that you make off of certain biomarkers, I think will become very more explicit and even more exciting. People will learn new dimensions of themselves and hopefully, put a couple decades on their lives. That's the dream. So my last, call it, let's say 4 questions. You've achieved a great deal so far in your career. What is it that sort of motivated you? And who are your role models? And why do you sort of continue to push yourself?
Yeah. Yeah, my biggest role model, biggest motivator was my dad, right? Uh, um, my dad who just passed away, May 19th.
Mm-hmm.
He's an entrepreneur, and he really, he's been an entrepreneur throughout my entire life, obviously,
Yeah.
uh, and really show me how to persevere, never take no for an answer, um, and just always push through any problems that you're facing, and have faith that you're going to be able to solve that problem, and to really think about how you can add value in the world in that way, and not just extract from the world, how to, and then even together with my mom, on a spiritual side of things, really spending time to build a relationship with God, and understanding how the things that you do are tied to a greater purpose, and
Mm-hmm.
having a sense of purpose in the things that you do in your life really stem from both that sort of spiritual grounding with my parents, um, and that being that sort of like conditioning from very young, being the driving force for me wanting to build something of my own, thinking about a legacy, thinking about how will I be remembered. He said this quote, that in life you die twice. Most people die twice. And what he meant by that is to say that you die when your physical body is gone, but most people end up dying a second time when the last person that is able to speak about them passes away.
Oh,
Right?
wow.
But some people are immortal, that their story will go on for generations, you
Mm-hmm.
know, that it becomes part of that history cycle of learning, that we know about the greats, we know about the presidents and the prime ministers and the artists and the like these different types of people in the world, that they never die. And so you want to think about creating a legacy that you die only once. And so I work every day of my life to die once.
To die once. Wow.
Yeah.
That's big things to shoot up towards, and sort of kudos to your late dad that the Erie is a pretty strong family. And for those of you who will have never met Cal's dad, like when you meet this dude, always smiling. And this dude is under tons of stress, but like just the biggest smile. And I think one of the things that I took away from my short meetings with him is the presence that you have when you meet someone.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people disregard a lot of success when it comes to the presence that you have when you're with other people. So making sure that everyone remembers, like when you're in front of someone, like, sort of bring your best self to the table. Last 3 quick questions. What 2 career tips would you give a high schooler, a college person, and a professional in that order?
Yeah. To a high schooler, start a business. To a college person, start a business. And to a professional, start a business. And the reason why I give that across the board is because once you're entering into a career space, I think it's really important to understand, not only from the employee standpoint of the value you are trying to bring to a company, and a lot of the times extract, like what could this company give to me, and that's the kind of mind frame you go into it with, to what value can you create in this world, and how difficult it is to create those environments that you ideally want, And so a lot of the times that sort of tension exists between the employer and the employee, because the perspectives tend to be from 2 different vantage points. And I think it's really important to sit in the business owner's perspective for a bit, so you understand how difficult it is to create some of the things that you ideally want within as an employee, to think as well holistically about the business and not just within your silo, because you'll be so much better of an employee when you can think across divisions and think how the work that you're doing in your space affects somebody else in their department, and how the pieces come together. You'd be so much more of a better value add to the company when you can begin seeing pieces of the puzzle together as the whole, and not just you by yourself. And so starting a business allows you to, or puts you in the mind frame of, I need to think about my product, the service, and the marketing, and the finance, and all of these pieces, regardless of the size of your business. You could be running a small shop, you're distributing something, but at the end of the day, fundamental pieces all still come together. You must have to have good customer service. You need to have a good product. You need to market it. You need to understand your profitability. You need to understand your finance and your cash flow. And once you begin understanding all those pieces, how they come together, the value that you go back now and do in your core technical space becomes so much more, because you begin thinking way ahead, like what's next and how is it going to reach the end customer and how is it going to be valuable. And so starting a business, that's why that's like, I think this my biggest recommendation. I think it really gives you that perspective.
That's, don't worry, taking notes. Been taking notes for a while, Last two questions. What are 3 principles you live by? I know you've shared a lot with us in terms of how you align yourself mentally and spiritually, sort of on your journey. But if you can summarize it for folks, I think it would be good.
Yeah. First one is all about finding like problem solving and thinking about a legacy, and thinking about how do I add value to people in the world and leave a legacy of problems that are either solved or progressed. And that's how I live my life. Like if I'm going through an experience and realizing like, wait, like this sucks and it shouldn't be this way, I either want to build something to solve that problem, or invest in someone that is solving that problem, or mentor someone that is solving that problem. So that sort of problem solvers mentality and figuring out how we can progress. I think that's like philosophy number one. That's like my North Star, right? As an entrepreneur. The next one is going back to what I said is people. It's the more you understand, the more you forgive. And seeing people as human beings, and taking away that sort of like personalization of negative experiences that you may experience in your life in that way, and seeing it more that human reaction to certain things. And a lot of the times people don't necessarily mean to act in those ways. They just act when they can't see the full picture a lot of the times. And so you forgive people and are able to not take things so personally. Those are some of my top 2 credos. And the final one being really just coming down to trying to put it into words. Just acting with a certain level, once again, people, because that's my bias, right? A certain level of compassion and empathy for people in their experiences. And what like they say, like everyone is going through something, everyone is facing a challenge in life, and so be kinder than necessary. And so having that sort of approach to life and to people, I tend to be a lot more patient with people and their experiences than a lot of other people. And so that is the lens through which I see life. And so those would be my sort of like philosophies and takeaways.
Great. And thanks for sharing that. And hopefully some folks can, incorporate that into some of their life philosophy. The last question I have, what are 3 books you recommend? I think one thing I think in our discussions that we share in common is we struggle to learn more formally. And I think, at least personally, like reading, I didn't take it seriously when I was younger. I think now I've recognized that it is one of the greatest pathways to sort of your success. So with that in mind, what 3 books mean a lot to you?
Yeah. So one of the first books that I read growing up, my dad gave it to me. He gave it to me like when I was 18. It's called Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. think it's like a fundamental book, right? That really teaches you that everything begins in your mind, like, and the importance of that core network of people of similar mindset. That definitely is like my number one book personally. And then as I began to think about companies and thinking about building companies, this book by Jim Collins called Good to Great. And he has another book called Built to Last. Those are like fundamental books that take you through an understanding of what is really important in the essence and ethos of building a company that becomes great and lasts for generations. I think that's a fundamental book that as an entrepreneur, you're thinking about building something that outlasts you is really, really important to read. And then another one that I really liked after I went through my big failure with my company with First was this book by Ben Horowitz called The Hard Thing About Hard Things. And that book really speaks about some of the hard experiences that entrepreneurs have to go through as it relates to like hiring and firing, and just like there's no like right answer a lot of the times. It's just about like execution, choosing what you believe is like the best path and making the best of it, you know. I think those books for me are some fundamental books that really help to shape my view on entrepreneurship and building companies going forward.
Hey, those are some solid ones. I haven't gotten through Good to Great yet. Think and Grow Rich. I think for anyone listening, those books are freely available. Think and Grow Rich is available online on YouTube. So just plug that in your ear while you go on a run. And Kyle, I wanted to thank you for your time today. We were on an interesting journey so far, and sort of publicly, thanks for plugging me into a 6-figure job through all of your connections there. And
excellent.
Yeah, and we'll have some more, but thank you for all the work that you're doing in the ecosystem as well. Right, looking forward to seeing what you're gonna do.
Yeah, man. Good job on plugging back in, and making those steps forward and looking back and seeing how you can contribute and bring more people with you. I think that's important, and I don't think enough people in our region, unfortunately, do that. So kudos to you, and I hope that more people are inspired to do the same going forward. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, man. Appreciate the time. Later.
All right, later.
Thanks for listening to today's interview, and I hope you took away some great perspectives for your own journey in machine learning and tech. There is much progress being made in tech in the Caribbean, so definitely join the movement. Remember that your Caribbean heritage is a great asset for your professional career, so take advantage of it and keep working on your skills. Later.